the importance of a clinical will, assume I know nothing and explain to me what is a clinical will. I don't understand.
Well, we should have a clinical will. Because it's part of being a 21st century therapist, we are now working within the sensibilities, the laws, the expectations from clients in the 21st century. And a clinical will effectively is a continuity of care. Now, no one likes talking about the thought that they might die, but the truth of the matter is we all eventually do die, and it's possible we could become incapacitated. So it's very important that as practitioners in the service of ethical and sustainable practice, we have a clinical will. And it ensures that in event of sudden illness, incapacity or death, your clients are treated with care and professionalism, and it allows a nominated colleague to inform them and manage the records securely, maintain confidentiality, fulfill legal obligations, and also maybe refer them for a period of time if they're a qualified colleague, work with them until they can move on to another therapist. And tellingly, ethical frameworks now, be it the BACP or the NCPS, are clearly saying that you should have a clinical will. It's not really a case of it would be nice if we had one. It is a we should statement. We should have a clinical will.
Beautifully introduced, Rory. If you think about it, a clinical will is, by the definition that it is a will, it is a legal document. Having that continuity of care is so important, and it's important that continuity of care sits in the hands of somebody who understands counseling, psychotherapy, confidentiality, data protection, all that we hold sacred as counselors, the way that we interact and keep our clients' data secure for confidentiality and, of course, compliance to data protection laws. What you're saying is, in the event of me not being able to anymore for death or incapacitation, that X person will be the point of contact, and they can have access to my client's list and my client's data, that this person also understands confidentiality and data protection and will hold this journey for this client, deliver the information, and help hand that person off, or at least smoothen their journey. And it goes a little bit further than that as well, because with each one of those clients, there may be an assessment form, there may be professional letters from other agencies or other professionals that you're holding. There may be notes that you have collected on this person. In other words, their data and their information. And that can be however you choose to store that information. It might be on a password protected drive. You would bequeath or hand over a way for the person, the executor, to be able to access those records. So if it was a password protected drive, they might have your password in the will. So you've said why it matters. It protects our clients, fulfills the ethical duties. It is compliance with the law, and that's important because we are holding people's data, and puts those clearer next steps over. So what are the things, Rory, that we should consider placing in a clinical will? There's a lot to consider here, Rory.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So the first thing is choosing an executor, someone who is going to take care of business. So if something happened, your loved one would be able to contact the executor, maybe a peer, could be a supervisor. And it's really important that an executor will know their executor. This needs to be agreed beforehand. And I would also say there's quite a lot of work involved in this. So you may want to think about a fee for people to do this work. Certainly if they're a professional therapist, it will take a little bit of their time initially. So first things first, choose a professional peer who understands ethical and confidentiality requirements, and they should agree in writing to act on your behalf. So this isn't just a bit of a chat over the phone. This is a very formal process, and also where things are stored. So very clear where your data is stored and how it should be destroyed or transferred securely, and also how long records should be kept. Because even though someone is not available, clients have the right to access their records. They may want it for things like legal cases. So the records have to be kept by somebody else for the duration of the contract that you've agreed. This is a real piece of work that needs to be undertaken.
Yeah, very much. And even if you choose maybe a trusted peer to be the executor of that clinical will, you'd still want to be briefing your supervisor on who that person is and their contact details so that the circle is complete, that everybody knows what part they play in this. We were talking about what you might put into that clinical will, and you've mentioned supervisor twice, Rory, and quite rightly. That's a good place to work out what should go in your clinical will, or if you don't have one, to set up a clinical will. You and your supervisor should be able to work through that. One thing I'd like to add, Rory, to the very comprehensive list of things that you might include, and it's instructions regarding your formalities and paperwork around your practice, and that would include your membership, your ethical body. It would cover things like your insurer, who are you insured with, because that all would obviously change, and somebody needs to pick up that and communicate that information. Any contracts that you may hold, you may have a contract with an EAP or another organization. We were speaking earlier about the impact on the client, but I think that as counselors, psychotherapists, we need to think about the impact on our loved ones as well. They will be going through their process and mourning. The last thing you would want for them is to be tied up in what do I do here, and them looking around trying to seek advice. And this, I think, is really important, specifically perhaps if you practice from a room within your own home or in your garden. I know many do, and it's a great way to practice. But the last thing a grieving partner needs is somebody knocking on the door asking for the person who is no longer there. So I think that choosing a clinical executor is a really important point here, Rory. We want to select somebody that we can trust, but we want to make sure that they are suitably qualified. We would want to make sure that they are a member of a professional body. It doesn't have to be the same professional body that you might be a member of, but they need to be a member of a professional body to understand the duty of care over the information that they may get. What do we need to consider regards that ethical and the legal aspects of this process?
First of all, I would suggest that in your contract, you state you've got a clinical will, and explain that to the client, and explain who you've nominated. And that takes any surprise out of the process. We hope for the best and we plan for the worst. So really make sure it's into your contract. And also make sure your loved ones understand what the clinical will is, who's going to be administering it. What you don't want is someone turning up at the door and saying, I've come to administer the clinical will, and the loved ones left behind don't know anything about it. So you're going to have to tell your loved ones or your next of kin. You've mentioned the insurance company, you mentioned the supervisor, two very important aspects. Those are the areas that I would think would be the most important. It's a big piece of work. And what I can say, Ken, I've been the executor of a will, not a clinical will, and it was a massive piece of work. And it lasted about 18 months to 2 years.
Yes. So I guess it leads on to how do you create a clinical will? With it being a legal document, we just always put in, this is not legal advice. Rory and I are two colleagues having a discussion about this all-important topic. It is for you to research, to find the right information, but we'll run over some of the areas. You're going to have your details as the practitioner, who you are, your name, your practice name, your home address, how to get hold of you, and multiple ways to be able to contact and get hold of you. And then there are two areas. The one is the clinical will initiator, and we've already spoken about the clinical executor. So the clinical executor is the person who will carry out your wishes. They're the person that you put your wishes, this is my password, these are my clients, this is how you manage that, this is how long the documents have been kept for, all of that information. That is the executor. They are executing and doing that work. But the initiator Doesn't have to be the executor. The initiator is the person who activates it or goes, okay, this has now happened. Let me make sure that the executor gets the document and the information they need in their hand. Current supervisor, really good choice for this. And the reason I say that is if something happened in my family, they don't have a knowledge and understanding of counseling to be able to make the right decisions. But they know who my supervisor is because I go there once a month, and they know their name and they know their contact details. A logical, easy to contact person. You're going to put in their name, their job title, their address, phone number, email, so that you want them to be contactable, and then authority granted, making explicit what that is. Might be putting there closing of my practice, managing any communications, delegate to appropriate individuals where necessary, a handover of your clients. You might have thoughts around that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. The initiator is somebody who would just phone up the person dealing with it and saying, look, this has happened. I know there's a clinical will. I wonder if you could come over to my place and have a look. And there's quite a few things that I think we need to think about. I'm sure there's a lot of people are going to be listening to this going, oh my goodness, this is a big piece of work. And the answer to you, and it is a big piece of work. And I would say, if you haven't got one, start today. Don't hesitate. Don't put it off, because you never know what the future brings. And it's going to make life so much easier for your loved ones and indeed for your clients if you have a well-written, well-executed clinical will.
Beautifully said, Rory.